I was sickened. I was sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless, en masse. And it really felt like, oh, this is a really clear indication that we're not the cool club anymore.
He walked away without any official punishment and somehow even received a standing ovation from the same room that had just watched the moment unfold. That reaction alone had people across the world shaking their heads in disbelief. For Jim Carrey, that was the point where the line had clearly been crossed, and within 48 hours, he stepped into an interview that would explode across the internet. Jim didn't tiptoe around the situation. He said exactly what millions of viewers were already thinking, but what many powerful people in the industry refused to say out loud. The moment his words hit the air, the reaction was immediate. People wanted to know one thing: what exactly did Jim Carrey reveal about that night, and why did it strike such a nerve across Hollywood? To really understand why his reaction hit so hard, you have to go back to March 27, 2022, and look at the entire sequence of events instead of the single viral clip that spread everywhere. The 94th Academy Awards at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles had started as a major cultural moment. The film Coda was expected to make history in the Best Picture category, and several nominees represented milestones in representation and storytelling that the film industry had spent years trying to reach. Everything was set up to be a celebration of cinema and achievement. Then, Chris Rock walked onto the stage to present the award for Best Documentary Feature and delivered a short scripted monologue. During that segment, he made a quick joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, referencing the film G.I. Jane because of her shaved head. The comment referred to her appearance, but did not mention her alopecia diagnosis, something she had already spoken about publicly and explained had caused her to lose her hair completely. The cameras caught Jada rolling her eyes, a quick reaction that instantly spread across every screen watching the broadcast. But what happened next shocked the entire room and millions watching from home. Will Smith suddenly stood up from his front row seat, stepped onto the stage with purpose, and reached Chris Rock before most people even understood what was happening. Then it happened. An open-handed slap that echoed through the microphones and across the entire theater. Chris Rock looked stunned for a moment, clearly trying to process what had just taken place. He gathered himself and tried to stay professional, while Will Smith walked back to his seat. From the audience, Will shouted twice for Chris to keep his wife's name out of a specific part of his anatomy, using language that the broadcast struggled to censor, depending on which version viewers were watching around the world. But the real shot came after the moment ended. Will Smith was not escorted out. No security stepped in. The Los Angeles Police Department had officers present at the event and was reportedly informed about what happened. Yet Chris Rock chose not to file a report. Because of that decision, no formal action was taken, and the situation moved forward without immediate consequences. And then came the moment that truly stunned viewers. About 40 minutes later, Will Smith returned to the stage, this time to accept the Best Actor Oscar for his role in King Richard. The crowd stood up and applauded as he gave an emotional speech, speaking about love and protection, while tears ran down his face in front of an entire room watching in silence. The room responded with loud applause, a reaction that left many viewers stunned as the night continued like nothing unusual had happened. But the conversation did not stop when the broadcast ended. Just a few hours later, the couple's 23-year-old son, Jaden Smith, posted a short message on Twitter saying, "And that's how we do it." He did not directly mention the incident, but online audiences quickly connected the dots, and many interpreted the message as support for his father's actions. The moment also triggered strong reactions from fellow comedians across the industry. Kathy Griffin spoke out with concern about what it could mean for performers going forward. She warned that physical confrontations on stage could set a dangerous example. According to her, comedians already walk a fine line with their material, and situations like this could make performers worry about audiences reacting physically over a joke. Another voice joined the conversation when Rosie O'Donnell shared her thoughts. She described the moment as upsetting on several levels and gave credit to Chris Rock for keeping his composure under intense pressure. O'Donnell said he showed serious restraint by not escalating the situation and called the incident troubling in very clear terms. By the next morning, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences released an official statement condemning the violence while also confirming a surprising detail. According to the Academy, Will Smith had been asked to leave the ceremony, but refused. That revelation quickly became one of the most talked about pieces of information to surface in the days that followed. That detail completely shifted how people understood the night. At first, the narrative suggested a man who reacted in the heat of the moment and immediately regretted it. But the fuller picture looked very different. It showed a man who acted, stayed in the room while everything unfolded, later walked on stage to accept the major award, and then left on his own terms. That contrast became one of the most important elements in understanding what the Oscars night truly revealed. 2 days after the ceremony, Jim Carrey sat down for a television interview and said something almost no one inside Hollywood seemed willing to say out loud. Speaking on CBS Mornings with Gayle King, Carrey delivered a reaction that immediately spread across social media and news outlets. His comments hit hard because he didn't soften the message or hide behind vague statements. At the same time, Carrey himself was not free from controversy. Around that period, an old clip from the MTV Movie Awards 1997 resurfaced online, showing behavior that critics had described as non-consensual. That clip quickly circulated again, and for some people, it complicated how they viewed his criticism of the Oscars moment. Ignoring that background would leave out an important piece of the conversation. Still, the core of what Carrey said about the Oscars night was direct and difficult to dismiss. His strongest reaction focused on the crowd's response. According to Carrey, the standing ovation given to Will Smith after the incident was sickening, and he argued that the reaction exposed a deeper problem inside Hollywood's culture. One phrase from Jim Carrey spread everywhere after that interview. He said the moment made it clear that the entertainment industry was no longer the cool club it once claimed to be. For years, Hollywood had presented itself as a moral voice, a place that could lecture the public about right and wrong. But Carrey argued that cheering a man moments after he struck another performer completely destroyed that image. According to him, the standing ovation showed a level of hypocrisy that people outside the industry could see instantly. Carrey also spoke about the financial side of the situation, and his comment turned heads across the media world. He explained that if he had been in Chris Rock's position, a massive lawsuit announcement worth around $200 million would have been filed the very next morning. His reasoning wasn't just about money. He pointed out that the moment was captured on video forever, replayed across every platform, and turned into a clip that would continue circulating for years. The argument centered on the long life of that footage. Once something like that exists online, it doesn't fade away with the next news cycle. It stays, it spreads, and it follows everyone connected to the moment far into the future. Looking back now, that warning from March 2022 has aged with surprising accuracy. But the most striking part of Carrey's interview wasn't the financial angle. It was his explanation of why the moment happened at all. When the interviewer suggested the situation had escalated, Carrey pushed back immediately. He said the moment didn't escalate step by step. Instead, it appeared suddenly because something deeper was already building inside Will Smith. According to Carrey, the joke itself was not the real cause. He suggested it was more like a trigger that set off frustration that had been building long before the stage moment ever happened. That perspective, surprisingly, offered a level of understanding towards Smith while still questioning the situation that unfolded. What made Jim Carrey's comments hit even harder was the principle he explained so clearly. He pointed out that shouting from the audience or criticizing someone online is one thing, but walking onto a stage and striking a performer is something completely different. That line between speech and physical confrontation is not some complicated theory. It is one of the most basic rules of how people behave in shared public spaces. The fact that someone even had to explain that distinction shocked many observers. In the hours after the incident, very few people inside the industry were willing to say it directly. Carrey's reaction stood out because he said the quiet part out loud. According to him, disagreement, jokes, and criticism are part of public life, but crossing into physical confrontation breaks a boundary that society depends on. What makes the interview even more interesting years later is that Carrey did not turn it into a personal attack against Will Smith. He openly acknowledged that Smith had accomplished many impressive things throughout his career. At the same time, he made it clear that the Oscars moment was not a good one. In Carrey's view, the action overshadowed a night that was supposed to celebrate dozens of artists and filmmakers who had spent years working toward that stage. That balance made his position far more layered than the loud reactions spreading across social media. It wasn't blind condemnation, and it wasn't an attempt to excuse the moment either. Instead, it was a blunt description of what happened, combined with a level of respect toward the person involved. But Carrey also hinted at something deeper. He suggested that the outburst may have come from frustration that had been building long before that stage moment ever happened. That idea opened a question people would debate for years. What was actually going on behind the scenes that night? One major piece of context arrived later, when Jada Pinkett Smith revealed in October 2023 that her marriage to Will Smith had already been quietly over for years before the 2022 Oscars moment. The story took another shocking turn more than a year later when Jada Pinkett Smith released her memoir and began a press tour that completely changed how many people looked at the Oscars night. During interviews promoting the book, she shared a revelation that left audiences stunned and forced the public to reconsider everything surrounding that moment on stage. In those conversations, Jada explained that she and Will Smith had actually been living separate lives since 2016. The explanation she gave was clear and direct. She described their situation as a divorce without the legal paperwork. According to her, they had stopped referring to each other as husband and wife years before the 2022 ceremony even happened. Despite that reality, the public image of their marriage continued. To the outside world, they still appeared as a united couple, attending events together and presenting the picture of a long-lasting relationship. Behind the scenes, however, they were functioning as two separate individuals who had struggled for decades trying to make the relationship work. Her description of the Oscars moment itself was especially striking. Jada explained that she did not attend the ceremony thinking of herself as Will Smith's wife, because, in her words, that dynamic had already changed years earlier. When the moment on stage happened, her first thought was that it must be part of a planned skit. Then, when it became clear the moment was real, her reaction shifted immediately. According to her, it felt like something had gone very wrong, and that someone close to the situation was clearly struggling in ways the public could not see. That revelation suddenly made Jim Carrey's earlier observations sound even more interesting. 2 days after the Oscars, he had suggested that something deeper was going on inside Will Smith long before that stage moment ever unfolded. That revelation added a whole new layer to the moment everyone had already been debating. Will Smith was sitting in the front row at the most visible event in his entire industry when the joke landed. According to the interpretation many later discussed, the comment touched something deeper than anyone watching realized at the time. The frustration that Jim Carrey had suggested was already building suddenly had a lot more context behind it. Jada Pinkett Smith's own description of the moment added another unexpected twist that complicated the simple narrative of romantic protection. In several interviews after releasing her memoir, she said the incident actually brought the two of them together after years of living separate lives. In one conversation, she even referred to it as the holy slap, saying that something positive eventually came from that moment. That statement surprised many observers. The act that some people inside the industry seemed willing to excuse was now being described by the very person it was meant to defend as a turning point in their connection. The irony was difficult to ignore, especially because she had already explained that she did not attend the ceremony as his wife and that her first reaction to the moment was confusion rather than gratitude. What that disclosure revealed most clearly is how carefully the public image of Will Smith had been constructed over the years. For decades, he had been seen as the cheerful family man, the devoted partner, the stable figure everyone thought they understood. But behind that image, the reality was far more complicated. By the time the cameras captured that moment in March 2022, the distance between the public persona and the private reality had grown impossible to hide. When everything unfolded on that stage, it was the instant the gap became visible to the entire world. In that light, Carrey's suggestion that something deeper was building inside Smith may have been far more accurate than people first realized. But the real question many people started asking was this: what did that moment mean for the entire comedy world? The tension didn't stop with the Oscars incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock. In fact, the situation seemed to trigger a growing crisis that comedians across the industry began talking about with serious concern. Just weeks later, another shocking moment unfolded during the Netflix's A Joke Festival at the famous Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. While performing live in front of a massive crowd, comedian Dave Chappelle was suddenly rushed on stage in the middle of his set. The unexpected incident left the audience stunned and sent immediate waves of concern through the stand-up comedy community. Authorities later identified the person involved as Isaiah Lee, a 23-year-old who reportedly had a replica handgun that included a folding knife blade attachment when he ran toward the stage and tackled Chappelle. That detail raised serious alarms about how much worse the situation might have become if security had not reacted quickly. Lee was later taken into custody and held on $30,000 bail while prosecutors moved forward with charges related to assault involving a dangerous weapon. The moment happened near the end of Chappelle's performance, and at first many people in the audience looked confused, unsure if the sudden chaos was part of the show or something real. Security and several individuals rushed in and quickly restrained the attacker while the situation was brought under control. Incredibly, Chappelle kept his composure and even returned to joking moments later. At one point, he joked that the attacker was a trans man, referencing the heated debate surrounding his Netflix special, The Closer, which had already sparked criticism from parts of the transgender community. And standing nearby that night was none other than Chris Rock, watching the moment unfold live. After the chaos settled, Chris Rock walked onto the stage beside Dave Chappelle and delivered a sharp joke that instantly got the crowd buzzing. Looking at the situation, Rock quipped, "Was that Will Smith?" The line directly referenced the now infamous Oscars moment and made it clear that people were already connecting the two incidents in the public conversation. In the days that followed, comedy club owners across the country started speaking up about the growing concern inside the stand-up world. Many performers and venue managers expressed support for Chappelle, while also calling for stronger security measures at live shows. One of the most vocal voices was Jamie Masada, owner of the legendary Laugh Factory in Los Angeles. The club, which first opened its doors in 1979, has long been considered one of the most important stages in stand-up comedy. Masada said the environment around live comedy had changed dramatically, and he described the situation as deeply troubling. According to him, high-profile incidents on stage can inspire attention seekers who want their own moment in the spotlight. When performers are physically confronted during a show, it risks normalizing behavior that used to be unthinkable inside comedy clubs and theaters. For many comedians, the incident intensified worries about safety while performing. Stand-up comedy has always relied on spontaneity, crowd interaction, and pushing boundaries to get laughs. But after these events, venues across the country began rethinking security procedures, audience screening, and how easily someone could reach the stage during a performance. Even after the chaos, Dave Chappelle made sure to thank the people who stepped in to help him, including Jamie Foxx and Busta Rhymes. True to his style, Chappelle quickly turned the tension into humor. Looking out at the crowd, he joked that whenever trouble shows up, Jamie Foxx appears wearing a sheriff's hat ready to handle business. The audience laughed, but behind the jokes there was a serious message that many comedians could not ignore. For performers across the stand-up world, the incident felt like a major turning point. It forced the industry to face uncomfortable questions about safety, accountability, and the growing tension between entertainers and public reactions. That conversation brought attention back to what Jim Carrey had said about the Oscars moment. His most powerful criticism was not aimed directly at Will Smith as a person. Instead, he focused on the reaction inside the room that night. Carrey argued that the standing ovation given after the incident revealed something deeper about Hollywood's culture. In his view, a applauding a performer moments after a colleague had been struck on stage in front of the entire world exposed a troubling weakness in the industry's moral backbone. Those comments sparked intense debate. Some people strongly agreed with Carrey's assessment, but others believed the criticism went too far. But the real test came in the weeks that followed, when the industry had to decide how to respond. Eventually, the Academy of Motion Picture and Art Sciences announced formal consequences about 2 weeks later. The decision was a 10-year ban preventing Will Smith from attending the Oscars or any official Academy events. Before the Academy announced its decision, Will Smith had already taken a step that changed the situation. He resigned his membership from the Academy of Motion Picture and Art Sciences, which meant the organization could no longer expel him. That move allowed him to keep the Oscar he had won that same night, even as the controversy continued spreading across headlines. The ban itself was real, but it came with important limits. Smith was prohibited from attending the Oscars or other Academy events for 10 years. However, the restriction did not block him from being nominated for awards in the future, receiving recognition for his work, or continuing to operate inside the film industry. In simple terms, the trophy stayed where it was, and the career slowed down but never truly stopped. For a while, studios moved carefully. Several projects connected with Smith were delayed or quietly pushed aside, while executives waited to see how the public reaction would settle. One of the most notable examples came from Netflix, who paused development on a planned film during the early stages of the controversy. Behind the scenes, studio leaders were doing the same calculation. Nobody wanted to be the first major company publicly backing Smith while the story was still dominating headlines.
But eventually, the numbers spoke louder than the debate. In June 2024, Bad Boys: Ride or Die, the fourth film in the long-running franchise starring Smith and Martin Lawrence, hit theaters and pulled in more than $289 million worldwide. The box office results showed that the audience for Will Smith's blockbuster films had not disappeared, even after the Oscars controversy shook Hollywood. The movie itself was not exactly a critical triumph. Reviews landed somewhere in the middle, which honestly wasn't surprising for a franchise that had always received mixed reactions regardless of Will Smith's personal situation. But one thing mattered more than anything else in Hollywood: the film made money. And in that industry, box office results often speak louder than public debates or cultural arguments. Whether critics were impressed or not, the financial performance told studios everything they needed to know about the future of a career. The decision by major studios to work with Smith again ended up confirming what Jim Carrey had hinted at in his interview. According to that view, the standing ovation at the Oscars was not some strange one-night reaction. Instead, it looked more like an early preview of how the situation would eventually be handled. First, there was a period of public concern, statements, and careful distance. Then, slowly, the industry returned to business as usual. When the financial calculations shifted and profits started looking more important than symbolic gestures, the same system that had applauded that night was once again approving projects and moving forward. But the bigger story of Will Smith's post-Oscars career turned out to be far more complicated than a simple comeback narrative. While the box office numbers for Bad Boys: Ride or Die created headlines, other projects told a different story. One of those was Emancipation, the Apple TV Plus historical drama that arrived in December 2022. The film was meant to be a serious artistic statement that could help restore Smith's reputation. Instead, the reviews were polite but far from enthusiastic, and the audience response did not come close to justifying the reported $120 million acquisition price. The film was clearly meant to be the big comeback moment for Will Smith, but in reality, it never fully achieved that goal. Emancipation arrived with huge expectations, yet the situation surrounding the Oscars controversy created a difficult environment for promotion. Marketing a serious film becomes complicated when the star of the project is also the center of an ongoing public debate. That combination created a strange outcome. The film was treated as an important artistic statement, but the surrounding conversation kept drifting back to the Oscars moment. Instead of launching a powerful comeback, the project landed in an awkward middle space where critics, audiences, and studios all seemed unsure how to react. Meanwhile, the headlines around the Smith household kept growing. When Jada Pinkett Smith released her 2023 memoir and began her press tour, new revelations appeared one after another. She spoke openly about the long separation between her and Will, her own mental health struggles, and the complicated arrangement they had been living with since 2016. Each new disclosure added another layer to the public story. While it was clearly her truth to tell, the details also shifted how many people looked at the family image that had been associated with Will Smith for decades. The brand of the cheerful, stable family man had been one of his strongest professional assets, and suddenly that image seemed far more fragile than the public had once believed. Then, in March 2025, a very different moment happened in Will Smith's hometown. A street in Philadelphia was officially renamed Will Smith Way during a ceremony attended by the city's mayor. The recognition showed how differently the situation was viewed in the community where Smith grew up. The celebration was genuine and heartfelt, yet at the same time, debates about the Oscars moment were still happening across media and cultural commentary. That contrast perfectly captured the complicated reality of Will Smith's public standing by 2025. In March 2025, Will Smith launched another chapter of his comeback story with the release of his album based on a true story. It was his first solo project in nearly 20 years, and the timing was clearly meant to signal honesty and reflection after everything that had happened. The album included collaborations with Big Sean, Tiana Taylor, Jaden Smith, and DJ Jazzy Jeff, and several tracks directly referenced the Oscars controversy through the lyrics. The idea behind the project was simple. Smith framed the album as a moment of personal transparency, presenting it as proof that he was finally speaking openly about the events that had changed his public image. But the commercial response was rough by almost any standard. In the United Kingdom, the album reportedly sold only around 268 physical copies. In the United States, it failed to appear on the Billboard 200, marking the first time a Will Smith release had ever missed the chart entirely. Critical reactions were equally harsh. Pitchfork gave the project a score of 2.4 out of 10 and suggested it felt more like a campaign statement than a true artistic work. Rolling Stone described the album as clunky, arguing that the attempt at honesty did not fully connect with listeners. Despite the disappointing numbers, Smith still moved forward with a European tour during the summer of 2025. The shows ran through cities like Hamburg and Paris, where real audiences did show up, even if the crowds were not enormous. Then, another complication appeared late that year. In December 2025, violinist Brian King Joseph filed a lawsuit claiming wrongful termination related to the tour. Smith's legal team strongly denied the allegations, calling them completely untrue. The case added yet another layer to an already complicated chapter in the story of a public figure trying to move forward while the past kept resurfacing.
The events that unfolded after the Oscars moment kept exposing deeper cracks that Jim Carrey had quietly hinted at during his interview. At the time, many people brushed off his words as speculation, but looking back at everything that surfaced in the years that followed, those comments suddenly carry a very different weight. Carrey suggested that the outburst was not really about a joke or a hairstyle at all. His view was that something much deeper had been building inside Will Smith for a long time. In that interpretation, the stage moment was not the cause, but the release of pressure that had been building quietly behind the scenes. Between March 2022 and early 2026, more context began appearing that made that observation feel less like guesswork and more like a description of someone carrying an enormous emotional load. One major factor was the revelation that Smith's marriage with Jada Pinkett Smith had privately been ending for years, while still being publicly presented as intact. The situation had already been complicated by the widely discussed entanglement involving someone close to the family, which added another layer of strain to the relationship Smith appeared to be defending that night. At the same time, his entire professional image had been built around a powerful character, cheerful husband, the devoted father, the reliable family man. But the private reality seemed far more complex than that image suggested. By the time Smith finally achieved the career milestone he had spent decades chasing, the Academy Award, the foundation underneath that success appeared far less stable than anyone realized. All of that pressure collided on one very public stage. When the cameras captured that moment in real time, it looked like a sudden outburst. But with everything that surfaced later, it also looked like the visible crack in a story that had been under strain for years. The bigger question Jim Carrey raised was never really about one moment on a stage. It was about what an entire industry reveals about itself when it applauds a controversial act simply because the person involved remains commercially valuable. Years later, nothing that happened afterward truly contradicted that observation. Hollywood continued moving forward in the same familiar way. New projects kept appearing, and the industry slowly returned to working with Will Smith again. In 2025, he even appeared during the Grammy Awards as a presenter, another sign that the door had never fully closed. The pattern looked clear. Hollywood constantly measures the distance between what feels morally correct and what remains profitable. And again, it seems to land in the same place. That is why the standing ovation during the Oscars moment now feels less like a strange one-time reaction and more like a brief glimpse of how the system actually works behind the scenes. The situation becomes more complicated when you look at the career itself. Despite the controversy, the franchise film Bad Boys Ride or Die still brought in nearly $300 million worldwide. At the same time, future projects like Hancock 2 and I Am Legend 2 have remained in development. So the career was shaken, but it did not disappear. What feels far more tragic is the deeper picture that slowly emerged. For years, the public image surrounding Will Smith had been built on the idea of stability, happiness, and a perfectly balanced life. But as more details surfaced, it became clear that the internal reality may have been far more complicated. The moment that should have represented the highest point of professional recognition arrived at exactly the same time that the personal foundation underneath that image appeared most fragile. When everything collided on that stage, it looked like a shocking outburst. But through the lens of everything revealed afterward, it also looked like a person under enormous pressure finally reaching a breaking point in front of the entire world. Looking back now, the observation Jim Carrey made just 2 days after the incident has aged surprisingly well. Out of everything said during those chaotic days, his explanation seems to match the long trail of events that followed more closely than most people expected. So after all the headlines, debates, and revelations, the big question still lingers. Where exactly does Will Smith stand today? Is he simply waiting for the controversy to fade away with time, or is he actively trying to rebuild the public's understanding of who he really is? By early 2026, the story looks far more complicated than the single image that dominated screens back in March 2022. The career did not disappear, but its shape clearly changed. The long run of unstoppable blockbuster dominance slowed down. The spotless family image that once defined Smith's brand no longer exists in the same way, and the reputation as Hollywood's most dependable, universally admired leading man took a serious hit. What remains today is a far more complex picture. Smith is still a talented performer with a remarkable catalog of work behind him. At the same time, he carries a 10-year ban from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences ceremony he once spent decades trying to win. His marriage to Jada Pinkett Smith remains publicly complicated. The music comeback attempt with Based on a True Story struggled to connect with listeners, and new controversies have continued appearing.
One of the most recent developments came in December 2025 when violinist Brian King Joseph filed a lawsuit involving allegations of sexual misconduct and wrongful termination related to a tour. Smith's legal team strongly denied those claims, calling them completely untrue. As of early 2026, the case remains unresolved, adding yet another layer to a story that continues evolving even as the original 2022 moment fades from daily headlines. Whether that lawsuit becomes a major chapter in the story or simply fades into a small footnote will depend on how the legal process unfolds in the coming months. What is already clear, however, is that the industry itself has continued moving forward with the same calculations many critics predicted. Several projects connected to Will Smith remain in development, including Hancock 2, I Am Legend 2, and a remake of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles alongside Kevin Hart. Those projects reflect a simple reality inside Hollywood. After the box office performance of Bad Boys Ride or Die, studios concluded that Smith's name still carries strong commercial value in the right context. In many ways, the industry behavior looks exactly like what Jim Carrey predicted in his interview. The same system he criticized continues applying financial logic to decisions that the public conversation briefly suggested might be guided by different values. Meanwhile, Carrey himself has taken a noticeably different path. In the years since those comments, he has largely stepped back from major film and television projects. The choice reflects a philosophical direction that has become visible in his public statements and creative work over the past decade. The irony is hard to ignore. The person who delivered one of the sharpest public reactions to the Oscars moment also became someone slowly distancing himself from the very industry he was criticizing. Whether that reflects pure consistency or simply the natural evolution of a long career depends on how people interpret his journey. But one detail stands out clearly. The loudest voice speaking out immediately after the incident belonged to someone who had already been questioning the system from the inside. Looking back now, the years that followed seem to confirm something important. The moment on that Oscar stage was not the beginning of the story. It was the visible symptom of something that had been building privately for a long time. All of that pressure finally surfaced on the biggest stage possible, in front of millions of viewers, in a way that made private denial impossible. The real question going forward is not whether studios will keep approving projects connected to Will Smith. The box office numbers have already shown that Hollywood is willing to continue working with him when the financial equation makes sense. The deeper question is more personal than professional. After spending decades building a carefully crafted public image, can someone shift toward a version of themselves that requires less performance and more honesty? And if that transformation happens, will audiences be willing to accept it? That question still does not have a clear answer. But one thing is certain. When Jim Carrey spoke during that interview on March 29, 2022, he asked a question that cut through the noise more clearly than almost anyone else at the time. The years since have only made that question feel even more relevant. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think Jim Carrey was right about what might have been happening with Will Smith that night? And do you believe the entertainment industry handled the aftermath the way it should have? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown interesting, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories Hollywood never fully explains. Also, click the next video showing on your screen right now. You're definitely gonna want to see this one.